Morning, everyone. So like Brittany said, my name's Katie. I serve as the executive director here on staff, and I'm really excited to be here today to share with all of you. So I'm going to start today we're talking about living on mission, but I want to start with two stories. And the first story is about a woman named Susanna Wesley. That name may be familiar to you. She lived in the late 1600s and early 1700s in rural England. She had 19 children, and 9 died as infants. She lived in poverty. Her husband was a preacher who went to jail for financial mismanagement twice. Her house burned down twice. And so she had a life, she had a lot going on. Somehow she schooled all of her children at home. I assume that was the norm then, for 6 hours a day, and she gave each one 1 hour of undivided attention a week. My house is nuts with 3 kids. I can't imagine 10. And so I was reading a book on prayer recently and how this woman was like a woman of God, but yet I'm sure it was impossible for her to get quiet time, like I like to think of. I like my quiet time, exercise, cup of coffee, and she couldn't do that, right? She didn't have that luxury. She was basically raising 10 kids single-handedly in poverty. So what she would do, she had this practice of pulling her apron over her head in the middle of her kitchen when she would get really overwhelmed and talking to God. And her kids knew that when she pulled her apron over her head and sat on the ground, not to bother mom. And in doing that, she was able to connect with God throughout her day and raise her children with the love of God. And two of her children ended up, John and Charles Wesley, starting the Methodist Church, the Methodist movement. So that's why they call her the mother of Methodism. All right, next story. Nicholas Herman was born in France in the 1600s, a little before Susanna Wesley. He also lived in poverty. He joined the army in France in order just to have guaranteed meals because he didn't know where his food was coming from otherwise. He was injured during war, taken prisoner by German troops and treated like a spy, so the worst treatment you could have. He incurred another injury which left him pretty much unable to walk. And so he left the army. He did some other jobs and he ended up joining a monastery, first as a lay person and then eventually as a monk. As a monk, he took on the name Brother Lawrence, and he was assigned the task of peeling potatoes all day, every day in the kitchen. And he stood there peeling potatoes, and I was reading something about him recently that said that he hated it, for years. He despised it, and I can't imagine why. He hated it, but he sort of wrestled with it, I think, and prayed. And there he describes this one day when he felt the presence of God in the middle of the kitchen, peeling potatoes, and then all of a sudden he had this shift inside himself where he felt God's presence there. And the rest of his years in the kitchen peeling potatoes were spent as his time just to tend to the presence of God. And he ended up just communing with God all day. Eventually he couldn't stand anymore, and they transitioned to make sandals, which also seems pretty boring. But whether he was peeling potatoes or making sandals, he just communed with God, and people ended up coming to him for spiritual wisdom and spiritual guidance. And he became sort of this expert on practicing the presence of God, even in doing something really mundane and routine. And the wisdom he passed on was later compiled after his death into a book called Practicing the Presence of God, which you can now buy. And it became very influential. And I thought this point was cool for a number of people, but including John Wesley, who then started the Methodist Church. He relied on Brother Lawrence's teachings. So you could see these two stories about a really famous monk or the mother of Methodism, or you could see them as stories about a man with a physical disability who grew up in poverty and spent his entire life peeling potatoes and making sandals. And you could see them about a woman who was in a dysfunctional marriage with a husband who kept going to jail, who had to raise 10 children in poverty single-handedly, but lived lives centered on the presence of God regardless of their circumstances. And while both of them are well known now in faith circles, like You might hear the name Susanna Wesley or Brother Lawrence. At the time, they lived lives of relative insignificance. Like, their worlds were very small. They both spent a lot of time in their kitchen, and they both experienced physical ailments, poverty, and they both found God there. I liked this quote from Susanna Wesley. She said, "Help me, Lord, to remember that religion is not to be confined to the church, nor exercised only in prayer and meditation, but everywhere that I am in thy presence." So I liked these stories because I want to talk to you today about living on mission. And when I say living on mission, I'm guessing there's a couple reactions that might immediately come to mind. The first one might be like, what does that even mean? I don't know. Is that like a missionary? I'm not sure what that is. It might sound like something for people like missionaries or clergy or people who work in ministry, or maybe people who work in areas of like intense poverty or suffering or violence or abuse. Maybe, social workers in an inner city, like work that feels like it has a lot of meaning in that way. It might feel something that you think sounds nice, but just not this season. Like maybe you're a mom or a working mom or whatever, and it's just not, yeah, that sounds great one day, but not right now. Might be something that you just think, well, I'm not qualified. That's for other people. Like, what would it look like for me to live on mission? So what is the mission of God? There's a phrase, the Missio Dei, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is the Latin phrase for mission of God. And it describes God's redemptive work in the world. So this is the idea about God, that God is always at work to redeem and restore and renew all things. So yes, it's about saving souls, and it is about like, okay, what happens in the afterlife, but it's so much bigger than that too. It's about the fact that God created this entire world, and he created every single person in his image, and he cares about the brokenness and the oppression and the injustice and the poverty in the world, and he wants his followers to join him in working to make all things new and to redeem and to restore. And that as we follow God, we get to participate in that. We get to be wrapped up in that. So I know probably most of you today are moms. It's called Moms by Design. You don't have to be a mom, but some of us have old kids, some of us have young kids, some are working, some are stay-at-home moms. So like, what does that look like? What does it look like to actually be part of the mission of God in this season of life? So I wanted to share a bit about my story. Brittany mentioned that before I came on staff at church, I was an attorney for about 10 years. I grew up in this church, actually, and then I went out to Madison. I went to California for a while. I came back to Madison. I worked as an attorney in government and then at the UW system in higher ed. And during that decade, I also had 3 kids in really demanding careers. And it was a struggle. Like, there were a lot of days when I was sort of in, like, survival mode. Like, I remember, sorry, Adam, pumping while on a call and like eating granola bars and like, or when I'm working from home, like nursing a baby and like, okay, is my video off? Like literally doing all the things at all times and just being, I look back, I'm like, how did I do that? When I had my daughter Millie, I had Millie on a Friday and I was in the office that Tuesday, like 4 days later, Tuesday, to do some sort of work meeting. Like I look back, I'm like, what, why did I do that? What was going on? But at the same time, like I did love my career. Like I really did feel like that's where God placed me. I probably could have had better boundaries, but that's probably on me. I really did feel like I had a calling and that I was being faithful to him and my children were taken care of. Like my husband worked for a time, but his jobs were not as demanding. So he kind of did more. And then for a while he stayed home. And so I felt like they were well cared for. And I did feel like this is my purpose. This is my calling. So how do I kind of grapple with this feeling like I'm being called in different directions? And in that season, I remember encountering 2 different camps of people, and I'm guessing you guys can kind of relate to this. I remember encountering those who were really impressed and admired with my work. Like I was like, okay, oh wow, you like, I was chief counsel for a governor at a very young age, and so there was a lot of like, wow, how did you get to do, and you're a woman and you have kids, like this kind of like, wow, like you can do it all. And I loved that. I'm an Enneagram 3. So like, I loved that, being totally honest. Like I thrive on that. Like, yeah, I can do it all. Like I'm doing such a great job. And then I also remember encountering a camp of people, mostly moms who felt like the highest purpose was to be home with your kids, and who would kind of make comments about like, well, make sure you don't work too much. Like, you don't want to miss this time. They're only little ones. And I think those comments are all very well-meaning, and there's a lot of wisdom in it. But I will say there's definitely also like this camp of thought that like the highest purpose and calling is to be home full time. And if you're working, you're not living into that highest purpose. And so you're kind of always battling like these two different ideas. Like, okay, well, what is more meaningful? Am I supposed to like be doing this really big job that seems really meaningful in some circles, particularly with people that care about those things? Or am I living out my highest purpose when I'm home? Like, which is it? So I learned this term lately, mompreneurs. Have you guys heard of the term, mompreneurs? It's like generally moms who stay home but maybe work, and this is just sort of like a side gig, and they typically like sell stuff online, and it's like kind of their own business. And there's all these articles. I just started Googling like, what's a mompreneur? And it's this idea that you can like be a mom and also have a side gig, and you can like have it all. And so I came across this article with this image, and you see this like this perfect woman who like balances work and home and family and meeting friends and travels and rest and self-care and communication and strategy. And it's just like, whatever, that doesn't exist. But it just made me think like, well, no wonder we struggle for our worth. Like, we're constantly bombarded on social media with images like this, and of like pictures of like moms with like 5 kids who look perfect and have style and have like time for massages and working out and eat perfectly healthy and like all the things. And so whether it's like it's external expectations or internal expectations or social pressure, I've definitely experienced that struggling with purpose, and I'm assuming we all have to some extent. It's sort of a fallacy that we can have it all in a perfect little balance. So I'm reading a book right now by an author named Tish Harrison Warren. Any of you familiar with her? It's called Liturgy of the Ordinary. She's really cool. I was just telling my girls about it before I came in here. I'm like, she's so cool. She's like this Anglican priest, but she's like, I don't know, probably early 40s, and she's a mom, and she likes Starbucks, and she loses her keys, and she like does all the things that normal like moms do. And this book is really it just really speaks to me in a way that I've needed lately. She talks about what does it mean to have a life of purpose, and she introduces this concept called blessed and sent, and I just loved this. So the idea that being Christ followers, we are called to be both a blessed people and a sent people. So she talks about the idea of being blessed as we receive from God by tending to his presence. Okay? Like, we center ourselves in God's presence, and we can do this a number of different ways. We attend to his presence throughout our day, just by kind of being aware of where he's at work. We do it through silence and solitude. For sure, we need those times of silence and solitude, whether it's like a walk in nature or if it's like reading your Bible or journaling. But it's also not just that. It's not just quiet time. It could be like different rules for life. We have to be disciplined enough to like build our life around rhythms that involve seasons of fasting, of Sabbath, where we disconnect from technology and we rest. Going out in nature with no podcast, no music, just like allowing ourselves to tend to God's presence. Sometimes it involves lamenting. Like when something happens, not just like pushing through it, but actually taking time to like lament and be with God in that. It can involve praise. Like you look at the Psalms and you see all these different ways of expressing different forms of connecting with God and being in his presence. And I just think there's so much to be said here. We could do a whole talk just on how to do this in our culture. We have so much that's competing for attention and so much like information and stimulation at our fingertips all the time. And I think because of that, if we're not disciplined, we will miss out on living a life of intentionally attuning ourselves to God's presence. So the idea of being blessed is that we're taking time to receive from God, and we create rules because that's what forms us. And if we aren't intentional about it, other stuff is going to form us, right? It will just happen. We will be reformed. We will be formed. And that God doesn't force it on us. It only comes through this disciplined lifestyle of making time and finding ways to connect with God. And then the idea of being sent is that we're called to be a sent people, to carry God's mission out to the world. It's the idea, again, of seeing where God is at work and joining him. And this can look a lot of different ways. It might look like meeting needs wherever you are that day. Like maybe it's a physical need, maybe it's an emotional need. You might have an opportunity to seek justice or to advocate for someone, to encourage someone, to extend mercy or forgiveness. The idea of being a sent people is that everything we do, every task we do, every person we come into contact with, God is at work, and that we're invited to be attuned to how he's at work in that person's life or what he's inviting us into in the task in front of us and joining him in that. That all of our life is a form of like living on mission. But the idea is that we need both. We can't talk about being blessed without sent, and we can't talk about being sent without blessed. So being blessed without sent, if we're people who just want to receive God's blessing, but then we just hoard it for ourselves, we don't do anything with it, we don't kind of take it out and pour it out to the world. I don't know if any of you have come here regularly, you've probably heard Mac talk about the poop pond. Does anyone know that story in his backyard? So they Mac and Josie live over by Roosevelt, and at one point they created like a pond near their house, and it was supposed to be, I don't know, look nice, I assume, but instead they didn't really tend to it, and then a bunch of ducks just started living there, and it just filled up with poop. And so the idea is that like, don't be a poop pond. Don't just like hoard water and become stinky and rotten. Like be more like a river where blessing kind of flows in and out of you. We're not just meant to receive God's blessing and then go out into our day forgetting about it as if there's this divide between like quiet time and the rest of my life or the sacred and the secular. Like this is my time to receive from God and then the rest of it is just something different. But the idea of being sent without blessed is, okay, I'm going to do all of these good things for God, but I'm doing it on my own strength. I'm spinning, you end up spinning your wheels. Like you're doing things that maybe you feel like seem really good. Think about pastors, for example. Like how many pastors have we seen who are really charismatic and like they have a lot of theological knowledge and they have big churches and big platforms and big buildings, but at the end of the day, it's sort of about themselves. Like they're maybe not taking that time to really attune to God's presence and center themselves on their presence. My point being, it can seem like you're living on mission and doing a lot of good things, but if you're not actually doing it from that place of being blessed and centered in God's presence, then it's really more about hustling for your own worth. So in this book, Tish Harrison Warren embraces this idea that all of life can be lived on mission with God. And she talks about being blessed and sent is almost like breathing in and out. Like you're kind of doing both all day, like blessed and sent, blessed and sent. It's not my quiet time is blessed and then when I'm at church, I'm sent. It's all day, attuning to God's presence and then joining him in his work in the world. And this happens not just in our quiet time, but as we move throughout our day. We pour blessing into those around us, into our work, in small, mundane tasks like peeling potatoes or making sandals or washing dishes or doing laundry or checking email, like blessed and sent, blessed and sent. Another book I like to read. Another book that I read recently by Pete Greig is called How to Pray. And I just love this rhythm, and I thought it connected really well here. He describes a rhythm that I have embodied most of my life, which is that you kind of like go throughout your day thinking about all the things you have to pray for. Okay, I have to pray for this person. You kind of encounter people that are sick or need prayer, or like, okay, I have this big thing coming up. I need to pray for that, and my kid needs this. And you sort of like compile this list in your head, and then you go into your quiet time and you like tick through all your prayers. Okay, God, please help this and this and this and this person and this. And he goes, what if we reversed that? What if our quiet time was just sitting in silence with God? Like sitting in silence and solitude and listening to God. And then the rest of our day was a conversation where we communed with him. Like as we came into contact with someone who needed him, like lifting them up into prayer, either with the person or in our own minds, like in the moment. I mean, you can take anything to extreme. It's not that we shouldn't ever talk to God, but I just liked that way of thinking about it. Like, what if we reverse that? And we had this stillness, this time of stillness with God, of listening, and the rest of the day was a conversation. Again, like breathing in and out, blessed and sent, happening in tandem all day long. But this won't come naturally to us. I think it's easy to take this idea of living on mission. Okay, Katie talked about living on mission, and like pull it into pre-existing frames that we have, where much of our Christian walk becomes very like performative. Like, okay, this is one more thing that I'm going to do really well, and then God's going to look down on me and judge me on how well I do this. I think everything around us tells us to derive our identity from things like performance, like how well we perform or achieve, including in the church world or the spiritual world. The impact that we make. It's easy for us to look at someone who like wrote a book that sold a bunch of copies and think like, wow, they're really living on mission for God. The influence we have, how many followers someone has on social media, I mean, you name it. So living on mission can kind of be one more thing that I use to give me my worth, as if it's like one more standard that God will use to judge me and see how well I perform. And I often do this. A good day is one where I like manage everything well. I feel good about my work accomplishments. Maybe I like my kids are well behaved and I made dinner and cleaned the house. I mean, whatever. And then I feel really good. And on days when I feel the opposite, when I like failed in some sense or I messed up at work or lost it with my kids, I feel bad about myself. But when we place our identity in like how well we perform or in things like impact, influence, accomplishment, we end up just riding the roller coaster, right? Like on good days it goes up, on bad days it goes down. Like we're constantly measuring our worth and our identity by something other than who God says we are. And again, in my own life, this is a constant thing for me. There are days, obviously I'm still a working mom, and there are days when I leave home and it really grieves me to leave them. And I'm like, man, I wish I could be home with them. There was a day a couple weeks ago when they had off school, and the woman who watches them during the week like took them and they went on a play date. And I was really sad, thinking like, oh man, there's a part of me that wishes I was home. That feels like, in that moment to me, that feels like the most meaningful thing I could be doing, and I'm not doing it. And then there are days when my 2-year-old is like screaming at me and I'm like, I don't want to change your poopy diaper, and I don't want it, like making dinner feels completely meaningless, and I hate folding laundry, and I would much rather get a cup of coffee and write a sermon because that's fun. Like I enjoy that and it feels purposeful and meaningful. And so which is it? So again, like the push and pull of wanting meaning and purpose and wondering how to best achieve that. So this brings me to this concept of vocational holiness, started by Eugene Peterson, and then Tish Harrison Warren also talks about it in the book I'm reading. And she describes it as a third way. So rather than our vocation, when I say vocation, I mean, yes, if you're working, that's part of it. If you're a stay-at-home mom, that's part of it. And if you do both, then it's all of that. It's whatever you do. Vocation meaning living out your calling. Rather than seeing our vocation as being something we do in order to perform, which then determines our identity, we receive our identity from God, and our vocation becomes like an outpouring of that. Okay? So if there's like two ditches you can fall into, one is my identity determines my worth. So if I have a really cool job that has a lot of impact and influence or whatever, or in my mind, if being a mom is like, that's what determines my identity, and if you're not a mom, then you're not living your highest level of purpose, like whatever it is, whatever your vocation is, that gives me my identity and determines my worth. Another ditch might be, whatever you do doesn't really matter. All that matters is my quiet time with God, and all of that is just kind of a means to an end. Like if I work, it's just like a means to a paycheck, and all that matters is my personal quiet time with God. But then this idea of vocational holiness, she calls a third way. It's one where we seek holiness. She says we seek holiness in and through our work, even as we resist the idolatry of work and accomplishment. So this third way allows us to live with work as a form of prayer, where our identity is not derived from our performance, but rather an outpouring of our life with God. So this is a paradox in a way. We resist work and accomplishment as motherhood or being a wife or working or whatever that might be for you. Like we resist those as idols, as things that give us our worth. But rather than rejecting them as having no meaning, we seek God's presence in and through them, and we trust that he is up to something, and those things become an outpouring of our life with him. This concept is described by the Latin phrase ora et labora, meaning pray and work. And again, it's the idea that they're intertwined. Like our work is our prayer and our prayer is our work. That we live on mission through everything we do throughout the day, whether it be work, checking emails, being home, raising kids, volunteering, going to church, whatever. But how successful we are at those things is not how we live on mission. We live on mission by surrendering those things to God and by communing with him in the middle of them, wherever he places us. And what's so interesting is that we can spend our time in ways that seem completely useless and unproductive to the world, right? Like we could be peeling potatoes in a kitchen or spend our entire day. During COVID, you guys, there were entire weeks that I didn't leave my house. And the work I did not feel very meaningful and purposeful. But it could be really meaningful and purposeful to God. And we just don't necessarily see that, from our vantage point. Or we could be doing really big things. We could be doing really big things, even big things for God. Again, like there are people who seem to be having really big influence and platforms and impact in the world. But ultimately it may not be. It may not be. They may not be doing it out of a place of a centeredness with God. So back to our friend, Brother Lawrence, on this point, he says, the time of busyness with me does not differ from the time of prayer. And in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, I possess God in as great tranquility as if I were upon my knees in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. So I loved that. It's this idea that whether he is in silence, in prayer, or peeling potatoes, or in a really crazy, chaotic kitchen with lots of people yelling and screaming, like he possesses the presence of God all the same. It might not look the same from an external standpoint. One might look really more, conducive to feeling God's presence. But when we spend that time being blessed, we can cultivate that deep awareness of God's presence. And then that presence becomes just as palatable to us, whether we're in the middle of chaos or sitting in absolute silence. We're not in God's presence anymore during our quiet time than we are in the middle of chaos. So I think it can be tempting to see this all as kind of abstract. I think for me, it can be easy to think of living on mission as something that's, again, more conducive maybe to a different season or different people, people with different jobs or more time or different life situations. And we can see it as kind of abstract. Like this is for those with like grandiose ideas about God and lots of theological knowledge. But as I was writing this, I thought, you know what? Look at the life of Jesus. Like he spent 30 of his 33 years as a carpenter, making tables. His ministry was really only done in those last 3 years. And likewise, our mission as mothers or wives or professionals or people, no matter where we are in life, is also created in those like little moments, the day by day, the minute by minute. Our vocational holiness doesn't wait for some future chapter, like it is wherever we are now. God invites us to tend to his presence and to live that out, whether we are weary and frazzled and exhausted, or we're doing great, or we're just plain bored. Like there are some days, I don't know about you guys, but there are some days when it's just like, this is so boring. I don't want to do I hate household stuff, so maybe I'm like a bad person, but I hate household tasks and it feels so boring. And so God is inviting me to find him there. It's much easier for me to like give a talk like this or like a sermon or something like that. It's very hard to sense God's presence in the mundane. But our task as people on mission is not to figure out how to inject God into our work, as if we're kind of like forcing a square peg into a round hole. Like, okay, I'm like a data analyst maybe, and I can't really see God there, so maybe I'll like share my faith with someone over lunch. Like it doesn't need to be this awkward thing that we do through our own self-control that we need to figure out like how to inject God into our work. Rather, we're invited to recognize where God is already at work, even in things that might not feel obviously missional to us, and to join him there. It's not our own doing, it's his doing. Knowing that God has this mission to redeem, restore, and renew all things, and that he's placed us exactly where he wants us. God wants to bless you and invite you to tend to his presence exactly where you are, and from that place, live on mission with him. And the wonderful thing is that it's not on us. Okay? I don't want you to hear from this talk, okay, here's one more thing I have to do to be a Christian. That's not what this is. This is the idea that God knows the demands of us. He knows our needs. He knows our desires. He knows all the things we have to do in a day. And he wants our good. He's not looking down at me going, well, is Katie going to fit in her quiet time today? He knows that I have a crabby 2-year-old that wakes up at 5 something. And this is not one more measure of our performance. God knows our demands. He knows our needs. He knows our desires, and he wants our good. So it's not up to us. Living on mission is not about performing in hopes of winning God's approval. Rather, our job is to surrender to the work he's doing and to join him in that work, laying down our own agendas in favor of God's agenda. So less about striving and more about surrender. So that kind of takes the pressure off, knowing that God's out ahead of us. He knows what each day will bring. We just have to open our eyes and be in tune with his spirit. And what an honor that is when you really think about it, to be people who are blessed and sent. God wants to bless us. We just have to make ourselves open to it. We just have to take a receptive posture and be attuned to where and how he wants to bless us. And we're called to be a sent people who get to join his activity of bringing redemption to the whole world. And that can look like really big ways, and that can look like really small ways. But we're called to be a blessed and a sent people living on mission where he invites us.